Coming up on 5-Minute News. Netanyahu opponents reach coalition deal to oust Israeli PM. Texas push to close shelters for migrant children alarms groups. And hundreds of lakes in the US and Europe are losing oxygen. It's Thursday, June 3. I'm Anthony Davis. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's opponents announced yesterday that they have reached a deal to form a new governing coalition, paving the way for the ousting of the longtime Israeli leader. The dramatic announcement by opposition leader Yair Lapid and his main coalition partner Naftali Bennett came shortly before a midnight deadline and prevented what could have been Israel's fifth consecutive election in just over 2 years. This government will work for all the citizens of Israel, those that voted for it and those that didn't. It will do everything to unite Israeli society, Lapid said. The agreement still needs to be approved by the Knesset, or Parliament, in a vote that is expected to take place early next week. If it goes through, Lapid and a diverse array of partners that span the Israeli political spectrum will end Netanyahu's record-setting but divisive 12-year rule. Netanyahu, desperate to remain in office while he fights corruption charges, is expected to do everything possible in the coming days to prevent the new coalition from taking power. If he fails, he will be pushed into the opposition. The deal comes at a tumultuous time for Israel, which fought an 11-day war against Hamas militants in the Gaza Strip last month, while also experiencing mob violence between Jews and Arabs in cities across the country. The country is also emerging from a coronavirus crisis that caused deep economic damage and exposed tensions between the secular majority and the ultra-Orthodox minority. Under the agreement, Lapid and Bennett would split the job of Prime Minister in rotation. Bennett, a former ally of Netanyahu, is to serve the first 2 years, while Lapid is to serve the final 2 years, though it's far from certain their fragile coalition will last that long. The historic deal also includes a small Islamist party, the United Arab List, which would make it the first Arab party to ever be part of a governing coalition. Netanyahu has been the most dominant player in Israeli politics over the past 3 decades. He has become a polarizing figure since he was indicted on charges of fraud, breach of trust, and accepting bribes in 2019. A move by Texas Governor, Republican Greg Abbott, to shutter more than 50 shelters housing about 4,000 migrant children could seriously disrupt a national program that already faces strained capacity to properly care for minors crossing the US-Mexico border alone. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which cares for migrant children, said on Wednesday it did not intend to close any facilities, but it was assessing the Republican governor's late Tuesday disaster declaration. The proclamation directs a state agency to deny or discontinue within 90 days licenses for childcare facilities sheltering migrant children. Groups that represent migrant children and reunite them with their families said the order could be harmful because it may mean more minors are sent to mass-scale, unlicensed facilities that attorneys and advocates say endanger their health and safety. Abbott argues that the federal government can't force Texas to keep issuing state licenses in response to a federal problem. The highly unusual move to order a disaster declaration, usually reserved for natural disasters or health crises, comes amid Abbott's criticism of record numbers of border crossings in recent months, but in this instance is clearly a move to undermine the immigration efforts of Democrat Joe Biden at the cost of human lives. Oxygen levels have dropped in hundreds of lakes around the United States and Europe over the last 4 decades, a new study has found. And the author said declining oxygen could lead to increased fish kills, algae blooms, and methane emissions. Researchers examined the temperature and dissolved oxygen, the amount of oxygen in the water, in nearly 400 lakes and found that declines were widespread. Their study, published on Wednesday in the journal Nature, found dissolved oxygen fell 5.5% in surface waters of these lakes and 18.6% in deep waters. The authors said their findings suggest that warming temperatures and decreased water clarity from human activity are causing the oxygen decline. Dissolved oxygen losses in Earth's water systems have been reported before. A 2017 study of oxygen levels in the world's oceans showed a 2% decline since 1960, but was less well known about lakes, which lost 2 to 9 times as much oxygen as oceans, the new study's author said. The deep water drop in oxygen levels is critical for aquatic organisms that are more sensitive to temperature increases, such as cold water fish. During summer months, they depend on cooler temperatures found deeper in the water, but if deep waters are low on oxygen, these organisms can't survive. You can subscribe to 5 Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5 Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Subscribe, rate and review online at 5minute.news. 5 Minute News is an Evergreen Podcast covering politics, inequality, health and climate, delivering independent, unbiased and essential world news daily.